Hello, everybody, and welcome. We got rained out in the park, and we all decided that I will complete our painting in the park painting tutorial here on YouTube. So we got interrupted with a rain shower, and we were just about ready to play with emphasis on our canvas with layer 3, and I decided to come into the studio and to complete my recording so that you guys have this information. So I'm just dispensing some color here on my palette. So continue to work with the same colors that we used in the park. I will put a complete list of all the materials that I used and its descriptions in the description of this video so that you can have that information. So I'm just getting ready here with everything in hand, and while I'm gonna get ready to do that, I'm gonna tell you what we're doing. So we're creating a glaze, and a glaze is a form of adding or enhancing color on your painting by using a thin translucent film of color. So here you can see me loading my brush with the Viridian Green and with the Cadmium Yellow, mixing the two together to create a little bit more of a yellowy green. And now I'm adding a little bit of water with my brush, and you can see there on the white palette how translucent the color gets. So we are going to just add a bit of that color on the brush into the far part of the wing, and you can see I'm not covering everything up. It is translucent, and it's going to give this wing a little bit more of a green hue. I'm going to continue to do this with most of the wing, both in the front and the head and the body part of our little hummingbird. This will begin to bring the under layer that we did in the freedom layer. It will bring everything together so that we can begin to bring everything into cohesion, a harmony. While I'm doing that, I would like to read some of the information that I shared in the park with you. I think it's just such beautiful information. It's worth reflecting on all of this lovely information again. The hummingbird symbolizes joy, healing, good luck, messages from spirit, and other special qualities. It is no surprise that the hummingbird symbolism and meaning are important to people all around the world. While they are tiny beings, hummingbirds pack a lot of powerful, positive energy. Just wanted to share a bit more of what we read in the park with you guys. The spirit of the hummingbird is a powerful means to lighten up your mood when you feel down. This power animal is a useful ally to lift up and instill more joy and playfulness in your daily grind. When facing challenges or an environment plagued by negativity, call on the hummingbird to help you bring a positive outlook on the situation and find your way out with optimism. I am just dispensing more color as I'm realizing that I need all of the colors that we worked with in order to complete this painting. So that was my magenta. This is my cadmium red medium. Very powerful color. And also the direct contrast to all the greens. So that makes the greens look more vibrant and the reds look more vibrant. This is turquoise. It was a lot of fun with you guys in the class today. The weather forecast didn't predict rain through the day. It was only predicted for tonight. I realized it might be overcast, but yes, the rain caught up with us. that 24% chance of rain, we were right in that zone today over the park. But with everything that I shared with you guys today in the park, we just proved again how resilient we can be as humans. This is my titanium white, very important color we're going to be using in order to define our negative space, which is around our hummingbird. So for those of you who are tuning in now, this is Gideonslight, and me and my partner had a painting in the park event today. This is my pearl white on my palette, and here by lunchtime, about halfway through our workshop, it started raining, and then it started raining a bit harder. So after trying initially just to sit it out with our umbrellas, and with such a beautiful attitude, everyone that was participating, thank you guys, we finally conceded that it is pointless. We are starting to get wet and we can't continue painting in the wet environment. So we decided to break up the circle, and I would then complete the painting here so that you guys can see what I did further. So here I mixed a little bit of magenta with my titanium white, and I'm just coming into these flight feather zones and just creating a little bit of a highlight. So the secret here is to work in little segments. It's all still glazes, so very thin layer. I don't want to cover up anything that is underneath. I just want to enhance it and bring things forward. This is the ugly phase of the painting, so this is the stage where you should be patient and allow each layer that you add to complement what you are doing and to bring this hummingbird forward and alive on our canvas. Just blending some of these lighter magenta pink zones. I'm blending them in a little bit so that it's not a hard edge. Again, I'm repeating the same idea here on the tail feathers, using the little bit of titanium white that I mixed into the magenta to just define some of these tail feathers. I've started on the left side of each major section, and then I'm blending it out slightly to the right, leaving a little zone between each feather of the underlayer peeking through. Using your little kitchen towel is a very handy thing if you want to control the water that is in your brush, or if you've picked up too much paint and you just want to get rid of some of it so that you can blend some of your color out. This is a common mistake that new painters do, is they load too much paint on their brush, and then they don't know where to go with all that paint once they start working in little sections, and then it can get quite sticky and even messy. That's great if you want to do a nice impasto application, but for beginners I think it's good to work with thinner glazes of color that you can paint one over the other for better success. Here I'm using the cadmium red, and I'm just gently brushing under the neck of the little hummingbird so that this little neck area of the hummingbird can stand out more. So I'm just feathering it out as I move away from this center core at the throat area, and I'm also going to go down a little bit on the belly, dabbing outwards as I move upwards on its body to create the illusion of those small little feathers. Here I'm using titanium white to create a lighter tint of my turquoise, and I also added a little bit of Viridian Green to it. I'm gonna now define the smaller feathers on this main wing. Make sure that as you apply paint that you always brush in the direction of the subject that you are painting. In this case we're painting feathers, so drag the paint with the paintbrush in the direction that the feather is on your painting. This directional brush application already helps to define that space then a little bit better. In other words, don't make horizontal smear marks if you mean to use more vertical or diagonal applications, because then it becomes more difficult later to fix those brush lines. I'm using a little bit of the titanium white again, and I'm using my bigger flat brush again, because now while that is drying on the bird, I'm going to come in and define the negative space even more. Now in the park we started doing this technique around the hummingbird to define it a bit more from the freedom layer. So this then is my second application of the titanium white, and I'm using my flat bright brush to control my line, and then also to place the white paint, and then I'm using the brush in a very flat manner as I brush away from the area that I just put the color down in order to blend it out. Now this flat brush I didn't activate by putting it in water, it's completely bone dry. I just loaded it with a little bit of titanium white, and now as I brush this out, because the paint is getting less and less on my brush, I'm able to blend outwards in a diffused way. So again, I'm not losing everything that's in the background. There's still glimmers of all the little marks and textures that we placed in this area, but this again helps to define the little hummingbird to stand out even more. So we're using the design principle of contrast here in order to define and bring emphasis to the main subject that we are painting, which of course today is the hummingbird. I'm going to continue now with the titanium white in this fashion all the way around in order to improve this contrast. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to read a little bit more for you guys. Don't be deceived by the size of this spirit animal. Even if the hummingbird is one of the smallest birds, it can travel great distances. Those who have this bird as a totem are characterized by their resiliency and their ability to run great distances tirelessly. It should probably read fly great distances tirelessly. Inspired by this animal, you will be inclined to accomplish what seems to be impossible to most while keeping it light and enjoyable. The hummingbird is known for burning a lot of energy quickly and to keep flying, and therefore needs to find sources of food constantly. If you have this hummingbird as a totem, you may benefit from resting often and taking time to feed yourself with enough, whether it is physically, emotionally, or spiritually, to keep going. I like to ask questions as we work on our canvases to help us reflect on our life as it is today and where we can incorporate the symbolism and insight that this tiny little bird brings to us today. So my question to you is, where in your life do you perhaps not take enough care of yourself? Where can you practice a bit more self-care and be a little bit more compassionate and understanding for your needs, so that you can serve from a cup that is overflowing and not from a cup that is empty? It's always a great question. What can you do to to take care of yourself physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I can even add mentally to keep going. Are you resting enough? Are you using a good diet? Are you exercising? Are you taking some time out for yourself? And are you spending time with family and friends? All of these things can contribute to our overall well-being. You can see here, working with a dry brush, there's absolutely no water in my brush. How it just helps me to define these negative spaces around my hummingbird. And as I brush and blend this titanium white color into the background, it's just so beautiful to see how this little hummingbird stands out more and more with each brush stroke. I'm going to provide you guys with a link to my Facebook group. If you're on Facebook, this is my private art group. It's called The Creative Heart. This is where I share a lot of free art classes. I do some lives when I've got time to help serve my community. This is also the space where, with all of my online workshops as well as in-person workshops, where I share photographs and support material, and this is where we support one another on our creative journey. Please join us there and share some progress art of your beautiful hummingbirds with us. And I'm so excited to see what you guys are going to do with your hummingbird paintings. So you guys can see with this painting made easy method of working with layers to define what it is that we are painting, it becomes much easier and a lot more accessible to the average person in order to begin to establish a creative practice in your life. Um, with classic or more advanced painting techniques that you could learn, obviously, there's various methods and ways to begin a painting and to progress through the whole process until you have your completed project. Um, with acrylic paint in general, it is usually a bit of a layered effect. But I think a lot of people think a good artist is somebody that's able to come in and with one brushstroke create a masterpiece. That does exist, but those are really special people that have the insight and brush mileage under their wing to know exactly how to do that. And you should not just be discouraged if you think that you're not that eloquent or effective with a brush, and it's not necessarily always doing what you want it to do. This is why this practice takes time. Even if you want to run the Comrades or a long distance running competition, if you're not a natural athlete and you have never practiced in your life, you will definitely not make that race, especially a long one like 50 kilometers or more, if you've never run even around your house. So with anything in life, it takes practice and persistence and a consistency in order to become skilled at anything. And somehow, as individuals, we think that art should be elementary, it should be easy. I mean, after all, children can do it. And when we pick up the brush and we begin a little process and we find it a little bit more challenging than that we thought it would be, that's where a lot of adults give up again, and they're like, oh no, clearly I'm not an artist because I can't even do something elementary like painting. So obviously, again, everything takes practice. So be kind to yourself. If you're getting into painting now and it doesn't look like the best painting you've ever done, that's okay. That's okay. At least you're trying. That's the whole point. And with each little exercise, every little project that you tackle, you become better at it, and it just becomes more and more enjoyable and satisfying. So now you guys can see that, all the detail of the white titanium paint directly around the hummingbird is defining him and bringing him out of the canvas, and yet I can still see some of the colors and textures in the background, and that is exactly what I'm aiming for. So this is almost like a little bit of a white halo. Now I'm using a little bit more of a clean magenta here, and I'm just going to define these flight feathers again, going in with a broader stroke at the beginning of this wing, and then as I take it out, I sort of just brush it outwards. Again, not trying to cover up everything underneath, but definitely enhancing it now with a nice bright magenta layer or glaze. I'm just putting little individuals, finer strokes between each, delineating each small little feather. Again, the same on the tail feathers, using the magenta to just bring in a light reflection in these tail feathers. Now I'm mixing some of the magenta with the cadmium red, and I'm turning my brush on its side, and on the top part of each of these feathers I bring in a bright red little stripe. You can see how that cadmium red now makes the turquoise look more vibrant, the greens look more vibrant, because we're using complementary colors. Complementary colors are opposite each other on the color wheel, and that makes, when you place them next to each other, it makes them look even more vibrant. So one of the tips I gave early on in the workshop is, when you switch colors, make sure that you rinse your brush really well and dry off the excess water so that you don't contaminate your colors. Here I'm using that bright cadmium red on the same little neck area of our hummingbird, and I'm just dab. As I'm moving down the body, I'm jumping and skipping areas so that some of those greens can still glimmer through. I'm just using my paper towel there to just clean up a little spot that I went over the line with. But if you make a little mistake like that, it's okay. You can always just paint some white over it again when it's dry. It's so exciting. I'm getting to the end of this third layer, or my emphasis layer. So everything I'm doing is just to bring more emphasis to my little hummingbird. Here I'm using the cad yellow to just define the forehead of the hummingbird. This part is one of the brightest areas on the hummingbird, and the yellow is helping my greens look a little bit more golden. Yellow is just one of those colors that brings in more light into the painting. I'm using some of the turquoise on the bottom part of each of these flight feathers. I'm adding a bit of Viridian Green to make it a bit stronger. And again, while that is wet, going over each line again, it almost has an iridescent or a optical illusion effect on these little feathers because of these contrasting colors that we're placing so directly next to each other. For best results, I do suggest that you make sure that these bottom layers are completely dry before putting a complementary color over it, so that you retain the vibrancy of your colors. We want to avoid making mud because these little hummingbirds are quite bright, and we want to have that luminosity of all the bright colors. Coming back in with a bit of cad yellow, and I'm going to now use this pearl white. Pearl white is a metallic white. It will give a pearlescent finish or metallic finish to my color. And I'm just coming in on certain areas of these wings with this metallic yellow. I want to bring in more light into these open feathers. And again, dab, 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 right here on the forehead, where most of this very reflective iridescent feathers of the hummingbird is noticeable. You can see I'm rinsing out really, really well between switching to other colors. Going to bring in a little bit of turquoise now with the pearl white to give that also a nice metallic finish. And again, just dab, 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 place little spots. The feathers on the hummingbird's face and neck is extremely tiny, and each of them reflecting a different angle of light is what gives it this iridescent beauty. This part of my painting ripped. It was so wet that with the packing up, that aspect of my canvas ripped. So I'm just using a little bit of Viridian Green over this area that is now exposed, the canvas, to just fill that in again. And now I'm just brushing a little bit of this Viridian Green over this belly area, defining it a little bit more. Because the Viridian Green is a cooler shade, it will give us a little bit of a shading effect. I'm also using it here on the top part of the flight wing, and this helps to define this space a little bit more. This is a very thin glaze of